Aaliyah Khan thought she had the perfect life, a rich husband, a dream penthouse, and everything money could buy. But when she discovered Omar Rashid's secret affair with their Filipina maid, Marites de la Cruz, love turned into lethal vengeance, dragging her loyal friend Zayn Malik and relentless detective Farid al-Mansour into a web of lies, lust, and death buried deep beneath the Dubai desert. The Crime Scene presents a new page of crime, a new mystery, a new shock case. Dubai's skyline shimmered under the golden sun, its towers slicing through the desert haze like silver spears, and for Aaliyah Khan, that skyline was a symbol of everything she thought she'd ever wanted. Her life looked flawless from the outside. A penthouse high above the city, designer clothes, luxury cars, and a husband, Omar Rashid, whose name carried weight in Dubai's elite circles. But inside, her world was hollow, a pretty cage wrapped in gold. Omar had changed over the years. Once passionate and attentive, now he barely noticed her. He was always too busy, always somewhere else, his laughter gone, replaced by cold silence and the faint smell of another woman's perfume that lingered on his shirts. Aaliyah spent her days scrolling through old pictures, trying to remember the man she had fallen in love with, the one who used to make her laugh so hard her sides ached. The house, despite its glittering chandeliers and marble floors, felt empty. When Omar decided to hire a live-in maid named Marites, a quiet, soft-spoken Filipino woman, Aaliyah thought maybe having someone around would make the loneliness sting less. Marites was humble, polite, and efficient, always speaking in a soft tone that made her instantly likable. Aaliyah welcomed her like a sister, even shared her old clothes and offered her a room with a view. But little did she know, beneath that gentle face was a woman who would soon become the center of a nightmare. The walls that had once held silence would soon echo with betrayal. In that glittering city of illusions, where everyone wore masks and secrets hid behind smiles, Aaliyah's perfect mirage was about to shatter, and the pieces that fell would draw blood. Nothing in Dubai gleamed as bright as her future, or as deadly as her rage. It started subtly, the kind of thing most people would shrug off, but Aaliyah wasn't most people. She noticed everything. The first clue came one morning when she found a lipstick stain on Omar's coffee mug, a shade of coral she'd never worn. She brushed it off, convincing herself it must have been from a guest, but deep down, her gut whispered otherwise. Days later, she caught a faint scent of jasmine perfume in Omar's car, familiar but not hers. She began replaying moments in her mind, realizing how often Marites disappeared around the same time Omar came home for lunch or how the maid's cheeks would flush whenever he entered the room. Then came the money. Extra tips slipped into Marites' hand for her hard work, Omar claimed. But Aaliyah saw the look in his eyes, that spark he hadn't given her in months. Her suspicion grew claws when she found a pair of lace underwear mixed in with Omar's shirts during laundry, a brand she'd never bought and a size too small to be hers. The betrayal started to feel like a living thing breathing inside her walls. Still, she played her role perfectly, smiling at dinner, thanking Marites for her help, pretending she didn't notice the stolen glances between them. Every move became a performance. She began to test them, leaving her perfume bottle misplaced, her jewelry scattered, small traps to see if either would flinch. When she walked into the maid's room one morning to find Omar's expensive watch sitting neatly on the bedside table, her world stopped spinning. That was the moment her heartbreak turned into fury. She didn't confront them, not yet. Instead, she made a silent promise to herself. If they thought she was too naive to notice, they were about to learn just how dangerous a quiet, broken woman could be. Aaliyah knew confronting them without proof would only make her look paranoid, so she turned her heartbreak into a mission. She reached out to Zayn Malik, an old college friend who now worked in cybersecurity and surveillance. Pretending she just wanted to upgrade the home security system, she asked him to install hidden cameras all over the penthouse. Tiny, discreet, impossible to detect. They were tucked behind mirrors, inside light fixtures, under the dining table, even disguised as part of the chandelier. Once everything was set up, Aaliyah pretended to move on with her life. She smiled at Omar, praised Marites' cooking, and played the doting wife to perfection. For days, nothing seemed out of place, and part of her started doubting herself again. But on a Thursday night, while Omar claimed he was on a business trip in Abu Dhabi, she opened the live camera feed from her tablet, just to ease her mind. What she saw made her heart stop cold. There, in her own bedroom, Omar and Marites were tangled together on her silk sheets, the same ones she had bought for their anniversary. Every laugh, every touch, every kiss felt like a knife twisting inside her chest. She watched in silence, numb but strangely calm, her emotions locking themselves behind a wall of ice. The betrayal she once feared had turned into something else, clarity. She realized there was no going back, no forgiveness, no tears left to cry. When the video ended, Aaliyah didn't scream or throw anything. Instead, she smiled faintly, a small, terrifying curve of the lips that promised something darker. The cameras had shown her the truth, and now she finally had the power. They thought they were clever, but Aaliyah was done being the victim. The game had just shifted, and she was about to play it her way. Aaliyah woke the next morning with a strange calmness that scared even her. It was the kind of stillness that comes when rage hardens into resolve. She had cried all she could, and now there was nothing left but focus. Instead of confronting Omar, she slipped back into her role as the perfect wife, the one he thought he could deceive. She began cooking his favorite meals again, dressing up for dinners, even laughing at his dry jokes. Marites, on the other hand, seemed uneasy, almost guilty, but Aaliyah's kindness disarmed her. She even gifted Marites one of her gold bracelets, telling her it was a token of appreciation. The maid smiled, not realizing it was a gesture soaked in venom. Meanwhile, Aaliyah's mind raced with precision, plotting each step of what she called justice. When she met Zayn again, he grew concerned about the emptiness in her eyes, sensing she wasn't planning to expose them. She was planning something irreversible. She reassured him she only wanted to talk to Omar and Marites, but her mind was far from talk. Late at night, she sat in the dim glow of her penthouse, scrolling through black market websites under fake usernames until she found what she needed. A rare sleeping drug known to cause respiratory failure in higher doses, odorless and nearly impossible to trace. She ordered it discreetly, her fingers trembling not from fear, but anticipation. When the small package arrived days later, hidden in a box of imported skincare, she hid it inside her vanity drawer, right next to her wedding ring. Every detail was now in place. The table would be set, the wine would be poured, and the meal would be their last together. Aaliyah looked at her reflection that night and whispered to herself that this wasn't revenge, it was closure. That night, the penthouse looked like a scene straight out of a luxury magazine. Dim lights glowing through crystal chandeliers, the table draped in white linen, silverware polished to perfection, and the aroma of saffron and roasted lamb filling the air. Aaliyah wore a crimson silk dress, the same color as the roses in the centerpiece, and her expression carried the calmness of someone who'd already accepted the ending. Omar walked in with Marites trailing behind him, both looking slightly nervous but trying to mask it with fake smiles. Aaliyah welcomed them warmly, pouring wine, complimenting Marites on her dress, even cracking a joke that made Omar laugh. Everything seemed normal, but under that surface was a deadly secret. Aaliyah had laced the biryani with a double dose of the sleeping drug she'd ordered online. Each spoonful carried quiet doom, every bite a countdown to disaster. As dinner went on, the laughter faded, replaced by sluggish movements and glassy eyes. Omar's voice began to slur as he tried to stand, his hand clutching his chest, confusion flickering across his face. Marites stumbled backward, her glass shattering against the marble floor before she collapsed beside him. Within minutes, both were unconscious, their bodies twitching slightly before going still. Aaliyah stood frozen for a moment, watching the scene like an actress at the end of a play she'd written herself. The silence in the room was deafening, broken only by the faint hum of the air conditioner. She poured herself another glass of wine and stared at them, her expression unreadable. But just as she began to gather her thoughts, Zayn burst through the door, his face pale with horror. He had been monitoring the security feed remotely, worried about her behavior, and what he saw now left him speechless. His friend standing over two lifeless bodies, holding a wine glass, calm as a ghost. Zayn stood frozen at the doorway, his mind unable to process what he was seeing. Omar sprawled on the floor, Marites motionless beside him, and Aaliyah standing there with a blank expression that sent chills down his spine. She didn't scream, didn't try to explain. She simply looked at him and whispered that it was already done. Panic took over Zane's senses as he checked for pulses, but both were faint, almost gone. He begged her to call an ambulance, but she refused, saying it was too late for that. Within minutes, the reality sank in. 2 people were dead, and there was no undoing it. Aaliyah grabbed Omar's car keys and told Zane they needed to clean up the mess before anyone found out. Against his better judgment, and paralyzed by fear, he helped her. Together, they dragged the bodies into the elevator, covered them with sheets, and loaded them into the back of Omar's SUV parked in the underground garage. The drive out of the city was silent, the glowing skyline fading behind them as they sped toward the vast emptiness of the desert. Aaliyah's hands gripped the wheel tightly, her face illuminated by the headlights, cold and expressionless. When they finally stopped far from the highway, they began digging with a small shovel she had brought, the sand swallowing their every movement. Zane's heart pounded as they laid the bodies side by side, covering them beneath the moonlit dunes. Before leaving, Aaliyah placed Omar's wedding ring on top of the sand and whispered something no one could hear. By dawn, they returned to the city, their clothes covered in dust but their story rehearsed. The next morning, Aaliyah filed a missing person report, crying on cue, claiming her husband never came home. The police believed her every word, while the desert quietly kept its deadly secret. For weeks, Aaliyah lived like nothing had happened, perfectly playing the part of the grieving widow. She wore black, avoided makeup, and let reporters capture her tear-streaked face as she begged for information about her missing husband. The story made headlines across Dubai, painting her as the heartbroken wife of a successful businessman who had mysteriously vanished. Detectives questioned her several times, but her story never wavered. Omar had gone on a business trip and never returned. She even staged emotional calls with clients on speakerphone, pretending to chase leads. To everyone else, she was a victim. Only Zane knew the truth, and the guilt was eating him alive. He started drinking heavily, seeing Omar's face in his nightmares, hearing Marites' faint breathing in the desert wind. Aaliyah warned him to stay quiet, but his nerves were unraveling. One night at a downtown bar, drunk and rambling, Zane told a stranger that he helped bury a man under Dubai sand. The stranger laughed at first, thinking it was a drunken joke, but the words spread fast. Within days, police picked Zane up for questioning. Terrified and exhausted, he cracked under pressure, confessing everything. How Aaliyah poisoned them, how they drove into the desert, and where the bodies were buried. Investigators followed his directions, and what they found was worse than anyone expected. Omar and Marites were discovered side by side, still wearing the same clothes from that night, their bodies preserved by the desert heat. But the real twist came during the autopsy. Neither of them had died from poison. Both had sand in their lungs, proving they were still alive when buried. When police arrested Aaliyah at a luxury cafe, she didn't resist. She simply looked up at the officers with a cold smile and said, "They should have stayed faithful." The story shocked the world, earning her a new title, the Desert Widow of Dubai.